Hello, John.
G'day, Whitney.
Yes. Man,
Yeah,
I love the difference in seasons and temperature and the different times of day. It's nice to talk to someone from across the world.
yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So
And
could you introduce yourself?
okay, so uh, in 1989, I went along to meetings with
Hmm.
a colleague from work. I
Okay.
was a beginning nurse. I was doing my pre-nurse course training,
Hmm.
and this lady, she wasn't very vocal about her beliefs, but she was a very practical lady and showed her love in many practical ways. And I was just astounded at the way she could prioritize her time and stuff like that
Hmm.
for the care of others. So,
Hmm.
um, so she invited me along to meetings back in would have been the first meeting that the sister workers had in Rockhampton in February 1989. And of course, Meg brings along this stranger, and I was in the back of this Subaru station wagon, and there must have been six other nurses female nurses
Uh-huh.
in the car with me. Well, the guys at the mission, the guys, the professing guys, they just thought, "What's going on here? Like, who is this guy?" Comes to the mission with seven professing girls. Like, who is that? Six professing girls. Like, and so
Uh-huh.
I've always been a bit of a like. I've had people scratching their head right from the start,
Yeah.
Yeah, so I knew probably fairly soon after I professed that I needed to be preaching the gospel.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd actually written a letter to God in one of my writings, and I actually made a promise to God, like if I ever knew the truth, then I'd have to tell it. I'd have to tell it to
Mm.
others.
Hmm.
So I knew that the work was for me once I found out what it was.
Hmm.
So, so for 30 years, I was given the liberty of being in the work, and then in 2023, I was told to find something else to do. So, so
Yeah.
yeah, so that could all that and I guess in the minds of many, that could have been very, very disturbing for me,
Hmm.
and uh, it certainly caused some questions in my mind. But leading up to that time, before I left the work, like I was under increasing pressure from the older brothers to conform to their way of doing things. Like
Hmm.
I would speak about adultery. I was just thinking today. I mentioned in a meeting. I didn't actually. I just quoted the verse that says, you know, uh, the marriage bed is undefiled, but whoremongers and adulterers God will judge. You know. Well,
Hmm.
that just doesn't fit real well with a lot of professing people. It does
Hmm.
not fit at all.
Hmm.
And so I was they were all, the older brothers were trying to shut me down on that sort of preaching, and like I didn't understand it,
Hmm.
but I knew that there was something very, very wrong, about things, and I thought that by me being honest and open before the friends at convention, that I could be a means for change,
Hmm.
and maybe expose some of this false thinking
Hmm.
that's in the fellowship. And
Hmm.
when it comes right down to it, we're just a group of people with all the same problems as every other group of people, but we think that we're somehow better and different.
Hmm. Yeah, so people will recognize you maybe from the exclusivity roundtable we did, oh man, a long time ago. And
Yeah.
you share a bit about your story there of what transpired for you during that season of your life. I don't know if you care to just touch on that a little bit of the Bible studies that you were going to or not. You don't have to.
Yeah. Okay. So in 2023, the start of the year, I was given the task of this of Gympie Sunshine Coast Field in Queensland with Carlisle Price. And there was a lot of resistance to me being with Carlisle from the older brothers who didn't like the way I preached. They thought I was being given too much liberty. and I needed someone to be with someone who would teach me to submit to the rules, you know. So,
Mm.
um, but it opened up for us, Carl and I, to have a lot to do with a worker that had left the work and actually married a Wesleyan Methodist preacher, Monique Lucas, who's also on CCF,
Okay.
and um, and and work through her trauma uh, regarding the meetings. Like for a long time, Monique couldn't sit in meetings because she was so triggered. And then, because Carlisle and I, we were just preaching the gospel. We weren't sort of diverting from that and trying to keep it that way. Monique developed she felt safe in meetings again.
Hmm.
Then, but then there was a lady that came to the meeting that they were going to, but just after a month or so of us having them there, and the gospel meeting, and she had the same hairstyle, the same bun as the sister worker that abused Monique before she left the work.
Mm.
Monique couldn't work it out. All of a sudden, she went from this safe feeling to this really, really terrible, like
Hmm.
awful feeling, and she couldn't be in meetings then for a while until she understood it, until she realized that little cow pat on that lady's head was exactly the same as
Mm.
as the sister worker. That so Monique was the one who taught me about being trauma informed. She was the
Okay.
one who told me about Oprah Winfrey and this Dr. Bruce, someone who'd written a book called "What Happened to You,"
Mm.
as apart from what's wrong with you, what happened to you. This different way of approaching people with
Mm.
trauma, and and that like I was so ignorant. I was
Mm.
so ignorant of all that.
Hmm.
And I owe Monique a great debt in that regard. Also, um, in that field was a lady who's also on CCF called Shirley Jensen.
Hmm.
So Shirley was there, and she was trying to rehabilitate to get back in the work. So we were giving her 2 meetings a week, half an hour meetings. Like I think it was a Wednesday and a Sunday. She would speak
Hmm.
for half an hour instead of Carla or myself, and
Hmm.
um, and she was just phenomenal in those meetings. She was so helpful
Hmm.
until the overseer, Alan Mitchell, came up from Victoria. They'd swapped him and Malcolm Clapham. They'd swapped, and Alan came up, and he basically said, you know, you're either in the work or out of the work, Shirley, and I'll knock you back to one meeting. Well, he just chopped Shirley's legs out from under her. And it was so unnecessary.
Mm.
But that was all part of that story. In that, like, it was such a helpful mission in so many ways. And then, like, I remember there was this Seventh Day Adventist guy that had these questions he'd given me the year before on a fool's cap page.
Mhm. Mhm.
And the lady that invited him to meetings said, John, what about him? You know, you never answered his questions. I think you should answer his questions before just wiping him off the list altogether.
Mhm.
So I said to Carlisle, well, how about we have a read with this person? Just go to their home,
Mhm.
and Carlisle said, I think we should just have a gospel meeting, don't you? You know,
Mhm.
Carlisle very much by the book, by the book. You
Mhm.
don't you don't go outside that. So we're visiting around this place called Kalula Cove near Tin Can Bay in Queensland, and Carlisle comes across this house with all these rainbow-coloured placards out the front. Like, this guy is a religious nut. Like, he's
Mhm.
just amazing. Like, I haven't seen anywhere signs like that anywhere in the world on Facebook or anywhere where
Mhm.
guys, someone's inviting you to footsteps of faith, you know,
Mhm.
communion, Bible study, Tuesday afternoon at 1:45. You know, everyone welcome. And like
Mhm.
his whole front yard is just littered with all these signs, which he's painted
Mhm.
himself, you know.
Mhm.
And Carlos sent me a picture from where he was visiting, and with the number, and I just smiled. I thought this is interesting. Like,
Mhm.
I'm thinking, you don't want to go. Surely you don't want to go to this.
Mhm.
But then in the car the next day, he said to me, I said to him, you don't want to go to this, do you? And he said, oh, give it a crack, eh? Give it a crack.
Yeah.
I was astonished. Like this is Mr. By the Book, gospel
Mhm.
meetings, and now he wants to go to this
Mhm.
place for a 1:45 study on Tuesday afternoon. You know,
Mhm.
so um, so I sort of made it clear to him that okay, we'll go, but basically, you ring, you find out the subject, you're running this. I'll be there to
Mhm.
back you up, but this is your baby.
Mhm.
Anyway, so it was quite a turnaround. We had a Tuesday morning meeting further down the
Uh-huh.
coast, and we've got about an hour and 45 travel, and only a 2 hour turnaround from 11:45 when we leave our morning meeting to 1:45 when we got to get to this other meeting. So we're
Mhm.
going along the car, and I'm thinking, what next? Like, what are we facing here? Like, it's just totally new to me.
Mhm.
Like, I hadn't seen anything like this before. So I said to I was just for some reason I still don't can't explain it. This
Mhm.
verse came to me about showing the Lord's death until He come,
Mhm.
showing
That's
the
right.
Lord's death until He come, and I thought, well, that would be a wonderful subject, for a meeting. It's, how do we show the Lord's death until He come? That's quite a deep conversation.
Mhm.
And and I thought, I wonder where that is in the Bible. And I had my phone there, and you're doing the search on your phone, and you're trying to get the words that it says, and nothing's matching up. And I'm getting really frustrated because I can't find this verse that I'm thinking about. And finally, about half an hour to go, there it is. It's 1 Corinthians 11:26. Right, that's all done. Now let's think about what we're going to do when we get to this place.
Mhm.
Anyway, we got to the place, and and I get out of the car, heading over to the front door, and I notice that I'm on my own.
Mm.
And I turn back, and here's Carlisle still in the driver's seat of the car. So I knocked on the window. Carlisle, this is your show. You go first. And Carlisle got out of the car and headed over to the door, and I was right on his shoulder, and we met with our friend Robert Murray.
Mm.
And Robert's quite an excitable man, and he met Carlisle with, oh, you're the fellas that rang up and asked for the subject. Yes, Carlisle said, yeah, yeah. And
Mm.
we're so happy that you're here, and it's great to have you along. Oh, I feel the anointing. He said, I feel the anointing.
Hmm.
And he says, it's going up my arms. It's sort of tingling up my arms. It's going into my shoulder. I can feel it. Can you feel the anointing? And Carlos got this great dumb look, like he's just perfect. He's just, I don't know, he's a bit of a comedian, Carlos. Like he
Mhm.
does the dumb look really well. And he says to Robbie, I can't feel anything, you know? And I'm thinking, oh no, this is it. Like this is not what, but there's no backing out now. We're here, we're in.
Mhm.
Oh, so we go in, and they have a bit of a talk before the meeting got started. Not that we were that early. And Robert's wife Jeanette says to me, "So what do you blokes do?" I said, "We're itinerant ministers, Jeanette."
Mhm.
And and she said, "Well, where are you staying tonight?" What? Like, in all my years of preaching the gospel, I've never been asked for us by a total stranger if I had a bed for the night. Like,
Mhm.
like it was astounding. and I had to reassure her that actually we were booked in, sorry, with our
Mhm.
friends. It was actually, we were going out for dinner at this very nice Thai restaurant with a couple who wanted to celebrate mine and Carlos' birthday, so we didn't want to miss that. But I
Mhm.
was really in the middle of it, thinking, "Wow, this lady has offered me to have a bed at her place, but I'm preferring to have a bed with our friends who are offering me a pretty good deal. But where does that sit with me?" And it sort of got me asking a few questions about what I believe
Mm.
and the way I do things. And then we get into the meeting, and it's and they start off with some music, and like there was a lady on a ukulele, an island lady who played a sort of a Hawaiian tune, but to an original hymn that she'd written, and it really hit the right note.
Mhm.
And then like this was another thing that had happened in our mission up until that stage. There was a guy coming who'd been out of meetings for 30 or 40 years. As a child, his father committed suicide with his three brothers, took them
Oh my
all,
goodness. Oh
and
my
his
goodness.
and his and his and his he was actually separated from his wife at that time, and he took his de facto's life and his de facto's child's life. So it was
My goodness.
five, six. It was the biggest murder suicide in Australia up until
Oh
that
my
time.
goodness.
Like, it's just a tragic story. Somehow God had worked around with Rod to get him back to gospel meetings again, which is what he was
Mhm.
brought up with. You know.
Mhm. Mhm.
And Rod's got an amazing testimony, and I shared it with the people there in the meeting when there was a time of sharing, which was after the singing. And
Mhm.
I said to them, "There's this guy. He's an ambulance officer, and he's been telling us his story about how he was in the ambulance, in the back of the ambulance, with this lady who'd had a right-sided, like, said left brain weakness, a right-sided stroke. She couldn't move her right arm.
Mhm.
So he's in the ambulance, and because of his upbringing, he's just there's nothing much he can do. He's just typing up the notes, for the admission to the hospital, to the
Mhm.
accident emergency, and he's on his laptop there, and next minute the lady's left hand flopped out across his keyboard, and he sort of got the message. This lady, she doesn't need me typing up a note. She needs just a little bit of reassurance and comfort, because she's
Mhm.
scared.
Mhm.
So, so he said to her, "Look, love, we're in the back of the ambulance, and the noise you can hear is the wind going past the side of the ambulance. We're going fairly fast because we're trying to get you to the accident emergency as quickly as we can to give you the best possible result from this
Mhm.
stroke that we can give you." So we've got a good driver. Just take it easy. And as he's saying this, he's thinking, well, what could a little prayer hurt? What could a little
Mhm.
prayer? So Rod just just makes this short, audible prayer, and his testimony was that very soon after he prayed, this lady's right arm started lifting up, like the affected side, and she had eyes like dinner plates. Rod
Mhm.
said, like she was more afraid of that than she was before the prayer, like
Mhm.
than she was of the stroke, and Rod, very dry, sort of a Aussie bloke, says to her, "My dear, that's a very good sign. It's a very good sign." He dropped her off at the accident emergency, never expected to see her again. A few
Mhm.
months later, he went back to the accident emergency, and this lady runs up to him, and she says, "So, g'day, Rod. How are you going?" And Rod's sort of like, "Who are you?" She says, "You don't know who I am, do you?" She says, "Lady, I wouldn't know you from a bar of soap." And she said, "You picked me up at this address in Gympie about 4 months ago."
Mhm.
Rod's like, "Oh, it's a prayer lady." And she's in the same breath, she's saying, "I got 100% recovery from that stroke after that."
Mhm.
And Rod's going, "No." But this was Rod's
Mhm.
experience. This is God working with
Mhm.
my friend
Mhm.
to get him back to God. Not so
Mhm.
much getting back to meetings, I understand now, but to getting back
Mhm.
to the one who's always cared and who's
Mhm.
always known, what was going on with him in all his distresses from the age of
Mhm.
9, from the age of
Mhm.
9. So I tell this story to these people, and they just, oh, that's definitely God working. And they said, that's definitely God working. That was good. That went over well. And and then we move on, and it's a subject. Well, we were into Hebrews 9, and it was mostly about temple furniture, and it was really dragging along. And I was trying to add a little bit of a clarity from what the Living Translation said compared to what the King James said. And,
Mhm.
and, and like Jeanette beside me, she's taking notes as I'm saying stuff, and I'm thinking, well, this is all a bit strange.
Mhm.
But anyway, we next thing was Robert gets up and he says, right, we're going to partake of the communion now.
Mhm.
And he's got the little, like, I don't know, have you seen the Catholic little uh, uh, wooden plate with the divots in it with
Mhm.
all little cups lined up, and then they've got the little wafers, little rice wafers to one
Mhm.
side, and they're
Yep.
handing them out around, and he's going around this table, which was like in a U shape, with about 15 of us there,
Oh, wow,
and
okay.
giving out the emblems to everyone. And I've got Carlisle over my left shoulder. Sorry, he was. Yeah, what was it? He was over my right shoulder.
Mhm.
And yeah, I could see him out of the corner of my eye trying to get my attention. Like, what are we going to do now? Like, the emblems are coming around. Like, do we do this or what do we do? Like, and I'm
Mhm.
and I'm just totally ignoring him. I thought, well,
Mhm.
mate, I don't know what I'm going to do. And I just told myself, well, we were told in the meetings that it's a personal thing and it's a conscience thing whether you take the bread and the wine or not. So
Mhm.
so it's over to you, buddy. Like just and I'll work it out for myself. So
Mhm.
Carlisle let them go, and I took the emblems, and I had the little cup and the wafer there in front of me, and Robert gets up and gives thanks for the meeting for the bread and the wine. I think he must have given thanks for both because he quoted, when you eat this bread and you drink this cup, you do show the Lord's death until he come. And that was the
Mhm.
verse that I'd been like really frustrated. Well, I don't know where that is in the Bible before I got to the meeting, before I'd even set eyes on this fellow. And here he is
Mhm.
giving out this exact verse in the meeting. And it's like God's telling me, just take it. Just take it. Isn't that enough proof for you that this is me in this, that I'm in this? When this man has quoted the exact verse that I put in your head before you got to the meeting.
Mhm.
And I'm sort of like, like, okay, God, okay, we'll do it. Like,
Yeah.
and and once that was done, well, the carnage, all the fallout from that.
Mhm.
Yeah. So, um, yeah. So, I mean, that's obviously, like you say, that was a big part of my testimony on CCF, like that
Mhm.
first that round table exclusivity, like that, like who would have known, So, I've been through all that. I've come to the stage that when special meetings came up that year, that I was separated from Carlisle. Carlisle was sent to another field with another companion, and I was given an older companion who was going to teach me how to submit, like it should have been done in the first place.
Mhm.
And, and it didn't work out, and I wasn't real happy with that arrangement. So eventually, Alan Mitchell, our overseer, told me that I better find something else to do because
Mhm.
none of the older brothers and sisters really agreed with what I was preaching. I said to Alan, well, can you just humour me and tell me what that is that I'm preaching that they're not happy with?
Mhm.
And he paused for about 5 seconds, like a long time. And then he said, oh, you know what it is. Oh, Alan, I've heard about gaslighting, but that's a beauty. That's a beauty, Alan. You know what it is. Thank you very much, Alan. And anyway, but I knew there was no point in arguing with him, so I just went along, and I thought, well, somehow, this is going to work out, you know,
Mhm.
and someone's going to come to their senses somewhere along the line, surely.
Mhm.
And then in the process of covering all the bases from where I left off in that mission, trying to work out just what had happened there, I caught up with my now wife,
Mhm.
and she's a lady who was brought up in meetings, and so when she heard about my uh, talk with Alan, she said, "Oh, that's not right. My sister Alan, she's been professing for 50 years. She knows Alan. She'll be able to talk to Alan and get this all sorted out for you."
Mhm.
And I thought, well, good luck with that, Judy. And she wanted me to go across to her sister's place with her and get it all
Mhm.
sorted out. And I thought, well, that's not going to look real good, Judy. Don't you know the rules? Like me in a car with an unprofessing woman, on my
Mhm.
own. Like, you
Mhm.
know what's going to look, And I was thinking, I ended up working it so that we went in separate cars, but we did have that few days with her sister. And Judy has been married and divorced 3 times.
Mm.
And as a preacher, it was all black and white with me that if you're divorced and remarried, you won't go to heaven, basically, unless you repented, unless you
Mm.
left your wife. And, that was all. So begins another story of do we do what God is prompting us to do, despite what everyone else is saying about it, or do we ignore what God is prompting us to do and not have any peace in our lives?
Mhm.
What
Mhm.
would you do?
Yeah.
What would you do?
Yeah.
And so I end up like after a long time of mulling over this decision, like I went for a walk in Tasmania that took 12 days. It should have taken 7. Like I nearly killed myself. And then I met up with a lot of people in Tasmania that had, issues with different ways they were rejected from the fellowship. Just put in my face. And then I got invited to New Zealand as a result of that exclusivity on that exclusivity video. And so I got 4 invites from New Zealand to come there by email. So I went to
Yeah.
New Zealand for about 7 weeks. And then over there, like it was, God just showed me, he led me to a better understanding of divorce and remarriage as it is
Mm.
written in the New Testament.
Mm.
And it was like, really? You know? It was like I was getting this validation for marrying this divorced woman, even though
Mm.
it's not something I never ever agreed with. Right from about 12 years old, when I was talking to my mate Simo on the corner, after school, like we'd say, "Oh, I'd never marry a divorced woman. They're homebreakers. They're just house wreckers. You'd never marry a divorced woman." And like from that time as a child, and then in the work, took that into the work, and very strict with that sort of doctrine. And then all of a sudden it's been turned on its head,
Mhm.
and I didn't get any peace with that with the duty question until I asked her to marry me. I didn't
Mhm.
have any peace till then. And someone said to me, "Well, don't you think that was a test, John? That God put you through that to test you to see whether you do it or not?" And I said, "Well, that's a very good way of looking at it, and I'd have to agree that that's probably the way I would have looked at it. But the thing is that I still have peace now with that decision. Do you think? Do you
Mm.
think I'd have peace now if I'd gone ahead with something that was against um, the love of God?
Mhm. Against
So
the
yeah, so I guess and and of course I think for this reason that I've married now married a divorced woman, it's causing a lot of conflict in the minds of people who know me. Like they
Mm.
wonder what it was. Like they say, "Oh, John, you changed. You just changed." After that, taking the bread and wine with those people, you just changed. You just changed.
Mhm. Mhm.
what did I do? You know,
Mhm.
I wasn't coming up with this. I had no agenda. I was
Mhm.
just, I was just doing what I was told because I've got a relationship with God that I've had when I was in the work.
Mhm.
You know?
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
one thing that has really been a help to me understanding about the meetings and where I sit now is that I see that there's been a precedent set amongst the overseers that they will protect pedophiles to save the ministry's name, and they will move them around to save the ministry's name. And and so we've got this because overseers go on the precedent of what the one before them did. They never divulge any secrets from the last generation. That would never happen.
Mhm.
So the secrets just continue. And so we are presently ruled in the fellowship, those that are in the fellowship by pedophiles and those that protect them. And that helps me to understand a little bit and gives me a lot more comfort for those that are really in the dark about all this stuff. You know, this stuff that's been ingrained in them if you were born and raised since they were children. I talked to a guy at a funeral on Tuesday your time, and he said to me, it's wrong, but it's so ingrained. The thinking is so ingrained that it's hard to resist it. It's hard to
Mhm.
go past it.
Mhm.
He said, I've got kids going on to gospel meetings. I don't want them to profess.
Mhm.
But my wife probably feels that if they don't, they're not going to heaven.
Mhm.
Like like
Mhm.
I get it, and it sort of
Mhm.
helps me to put everything in its order and not to get too bitter and twisted about the way I was treated. And
Mhm.
probably my overall view of uh, from where I was in the beginning when I went along to those meetings in Rockhampton, as didn't know anything, like and offering for the ministry and offering giving my life and all my possessions and going out into the work
Mhm.
and then at the end of like halfway through 2023 I've been told find something else to do. It was like, oh well, John, you started with nothing, you got nothing, you got
Mhm.
nothing now. Isn't that the way Jesus lived his life? He started with nothing and he ended with actually less than nothing. He ended up dying the death of the worst criminal on that cruel cross to save you and I from lost eternity. So I don't. I guess I've just seen in a lot of workers that they've got this idea that they're entitled somehow to being treated well in the work,
Mhm.
whereas I never had that. I never took that entitlement, really. I thought it would
Mhm.
be nice, because you read about the servant in the Old Testament that if he left his master after 7 years that he could go free, and the master was supposed to look after him, and make sure that he had everything he needed for the life he was going to live after that. And
Mhm.
so I thought, with me leaving the work, if I ever came to that, I'd be looked after. And I guess that's the way a lot of us feel that are in the work. Then we find that actually that's not the case.
Mhm.
But right now I'm staying in the home of my cousin Paula, who very kindly has bequeathed her estate to myself and to my two siblings.
Mhm.
Like life doesn't get much better
Mhm.
for me now, Whitney. I've
Mhm.
got I've got liberty in so many ways. I've got
Yes.
now I've got financial liberty.
Mhm.
I'm actually thinking coming across the Pacific to see you guys, with
That would be
the
lovely.
money and I didn't have to worry about anything. Like if you do what gives you peace with God, God will bless that. He
Mhm.
will. He will, and we don't have to worry. I
Mhm.
mean, certainly people look at my life and think, he's a bit of a maverick. Like, really?
Yeah.
Can I believe that? But that's been my experience, and I guess if that helps someone, that'll be fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I just appreciate so much of what you say of doing what gives you peace will lead to liberty because it's so evident that
yeah,
through it all, being mistreated and such, liberty can come by doing the right thing.
yeah, can, and it will. You know,
Yeah.
unlike all
I,
those people who were told who left the meetings, that's what's going to happen to them.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I had this experience at this funeral. I was talking to Carlisle, and Carlisle's going to East Timor this year. So he's getting out of all the mess that's happened in Queensland. And he actually expressed that to me that that'd be good. And there were people, the friends, like a lot of friends at this funeral, they were looking at me and Carlisle and thinking, I thought those two had a falling out. They were
Mm,
split up after their year together in 2023. I didn't think they got on together too well, but we have never, ever had a falling out. It's just
mhm.
what people have imagined or been told. And then I noticed after me talking to Carlo, people who had previously ignored me were coming up and shaking my hand at the funeral. Like,
Mhm.
oh, it wasn't what we thought at all.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
so and that'll come too, I think, with all of
Mhm.
us that have been misunderstood in any way.
Mm,
The
mm,
truth comes out, and
mhm,
you don't have to be angry. You don't
mhm.
have to be, tipping over tables, to get the attention. It's just
Yeah.
those people. Most of those people that I could freely mix amongst them. I could talk about their situations because I know their situations, and I could find out what was happening with them, with the meetings, and with their health, and all different things that I knew about. And nothing had
Mhm,
changed, and they knew that. They knew that nothing had changed with me
mhm,
as far as my feelings toward them. Yeah.
mhm.
Okay, that's probably
I
enough.
appreciate it, John. I appreciate it so much. Thank you for not only joining me for the early roundtable and sharing part of your story there, but I really appreciate you resharing part of it and sharing more.
Well, Whitney, I appreciate you're going to get the blame for this. Who do you think you are, Whitney Nelson? Who do you
Oh,
think you are?
yeah, we get it.
But thank you for this
Yeah,
opportunity.
yeah.
Thank
It's so worth it to hear all these stories that are just so different and also the same, you know? Yeah,
you.
I appreciate it. Thank you. Have a beautiful day there.
Yeah, thanks, Whitney. See
Bye.
ya.